All right.
So much paperwork every time.
So much paperwork.
You're gonna love this then.
Sweet. I only have to love it for a couple more months. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Educational Programs and Services Committee. I am your host and chairman, Mike Elliott. I am joined by fellow board members Emily McCormick and JP Prego. How you doing, guys?
Hi.
Hi. All right, we've got our assistant superintendent, Dr. Andrea Farina, right here. We've got Carol Gimlin. How you doing? We have Amy Coyle. How you doing?
Hello.
We have Kim Bass.
Hi.
No Sarah Rothenmel tonight.
No, she's away.
Wow, it's so great to see all you guys. Hi, Jim. Just kidding. You're awesome too. Okay, so let's have approval of the May 18th, on our agenda, approval of the May 18th Educational Programs Services Minutes.
Motion.
Second.
Any discussion?
No, sir.
Hearing, no, you had a second.
I said no, sir.
No, sir. Oh, okay. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. It is time for a TSI update.
Yes, indeed.
Dr. Farina.
So this month for TSI, the month of September is really the collection of all of our baseline data. So much of the TSI improvement plan requires that data to be collected, analyzed in order for us to report. So we saw how we ended last year. We're in the process of collecting how we begin this year. And so, you know, it's going to be on here as a standing item for every EPS. This month, you're not going to see really much of anything. In October, they are going to present all of the action steps and the data,
Okay.
and then explain their goals around that data. Some of the things that we've been working with the high school is to ensure that all the benchmarks, the achievement data, those benchmark assessments or link it were completed. There's a lot of other organizational efforts. MTSS in the first 3 days of the professional development calendar, we were all over at the high school supporting the building administration in meeting with all of their respective departments to talk about those action steps. Some of the things that we have personally contributed to and ensured around the TSI is that there is a very explicit process to monitor the at-risk status of students. I meet and Alan meets with Rob to talk about the work around the TSI plan. And, you know, we have to give some feedback because this is very much a process that we need to make sure is happening.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of really great work. The TOSA for MTSS, Megan Smolinski, is excellent. She and Jen Cenobitis have really championed the MTSS process. I think you heard at the end of last year, we need to do it. We need to do it with Fidelity. When they got up here and presented in August, you know, I think we talked about the intentional, purposeful efforts and that everyone has to be a part of it. And so those meetings have and are and will continue to happen. And so part of the portal does require us to formally submit progress notes. However, we won't wait till those timestamps. We'll really try and do it every month because the high school team will have to go in and report their progress to the state. We had to resubmit that plan. The high school needed to include 2 students on their
2
committee.
additional.
So we got it back and they had to include 2 students. There was some strategy around including students, particularly our board reps who are going to continuously hear and be able to provide feedback from their lens around some of the things that were happening. So we had to resubmit that portion of it.
Okay.
Okay.
When the high school submits to the state, how frequently is that?
Every quarter, so every 9 weeks.
Every 9 weeks?
Well-
Okay. Give or take.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
I mean, it gets
Yep.
wonky
Yeah.
around November,
Yeah.
December,
Yeah.
because it's just
Right.
not,
It's close.
the time, the number of days is different.
Yeah.
That's a requirement,
Mhm.
but we're doing more, or we're just meeting more?
We want them to come to every EPS meeting,
Okay,
because
So-
there's a lot of work
okay.
And I felt strongly that what I heard was, from the board was, you need to keep us updated on what you're doing.
Uh-huh.
And JP, in terms of meeting more also, we do have a standing meeting for MTSS at the high school. So that happens at least once a cycle. So that's the method by which we're monitoring everything and keeping track of students, not just the ones we know are at risk, but continuing to collect data about students who might be struggling and try to meet their needs. So that's the mechanism. So we're meeting at least once a cycle.
And then we
Yeah,
also,
MTSS.
which we've always done at the 5 buildings, we have monthly group special education meetings, and then we have one-to-ones every month. But at the high school, for example, this year, so a lot of, or part of the agenda is definitely every month TSI. And a lot of those different things, because another thing, as Andrew was saying, implementation in the special ed world, so we do some compliance checklists, which we've changed specifically for the high school this year, just for special ed paperwork that will come over. And it's very, very much more detailed and a lot more involvement from the building administrators. So on the agenda every month is like in relation to this as well.
And have there, I know one of the things, because I just looked at my notes, was we talked about like getting into the classrooms and stuff like that more. Is that something that we're analyzing the data and then implementing with the walkthroughs?
So the answer to that is yes. So you will see and you're going to see this across all buildings in full
Okay.
disclosure. So the team developed a walkthrough form that reflects, engaging practices. Those high leverage practices we know yield good quality instruction, and then the correlation is obviously increased student achievement. And so we went through that process. We have implemented, we have that tool. The high school is committed to those 5 a week walkthroughs.
So
What we
that's,
That started. and-
Yeah, that's
Correct,
started
that has started.
this week.
So we had a conversation about it today because part of that requires inter-rater reliability. So
Inter what?
Inter-rater reliability, right? So,
whoa.
right?
Slow down, Andrea, how many
Yeah,
internet?
no,
How do
yeah.
you spell it?
So, and I'm gonna move back so I.
Google that.
So what happens in observation, the strength of observation is feedback. And so oftentimes, we have to make sure that what Kim is looking for sees I see, or something similar, right? So if we're seeing and providing feedback that is totally divergent, then that's problematic for the teacher.
Okay.
And so part of implementing this was really gathering an understanding of what high-quality instruction looks like from a supervisory perspective, and how do you know? And so some of us, have really dug in and said, observations are supposed to be evidence-based. They're not feelings-based. The question is, did you see it?
Right.
What is the evidence of that practice happening? And so that's what we want to talk to people about. There are some really good things that we see that look engaging and are fun, but might not be around the appropriate curriculum. And so we have to have those kinds of dialogues as administrators to say, well, that's interesting. I saw this, you saw that, we watched the same lesson. And so that's work we have to do on top of making sure principals and administrators are in the classrooms giving feedback.
That makes sense. It's almost kind of like, it's almost like parents, like if we had kids and you're on gym for one thing and I'm on gym for something else, like it only helps if we're on the
Yeah,
same
And you
page. So that
really do
makes
learn
sense.
from each other in that debrief conversation, like, wow, I totally missed that. Maybe I wasn't looking for it. So you learn no matter what the outcome is, even if you agree, you
Right, because then
some additional
she's like,
stuff.
oh, and I'm like, oh, man, I should have thought about that. That's a good call, right?
It's
So we-
written,
So
yeah.
that's inter-rater, that's what that is?
Yep.
To make sure if we saw the same thing, we rate similarly, inter-rater reliability, so the
Okay.
tool makes sense for everybody.
Yeah.
The way it's written is that the team was concerned that, what if I don't see all this? So you won't. If you're going in for a 15-minute walkthrough, you might not see everything. So
Right.
there's a category for it, I didn't observe it, didn't happen. But there's 2 things in almost every category, I did observe this, or I did observe this, and then there's 2 or 1 that says consider this as a teacher. So it's got that feedback built in to say, yeah, you used groups, that's great. We don't want you to stop there where your group's purposeful. Did it have the impact that you hoped it would? So it's written in such a way that it's coaching, I hope
Yes.
it's perceived that way. I don't know, we'll be in your classroom soon.
But to answer your question,
I want feedback, I need feedback.
the goal.
I mean, I'm getting feedback, but
Yes.
just all the feedback is helpful.
So, as, you know, as somebody who has, as a building principal, the answer to looking at those walkthroughs from a data lens, yes. So what are we observing as common practices? What might be missing that we think would be highly effective for kids? And then how do we provide professional development to staff to build their skill set in that area? You know, one of the best examples I can give as an elementary principal was around questioning and discussion techniques, particularly with young children. We often ask very simple, very explicit questions. Well, those fundamentally don't engage
Right.
cognitive thinking, and there are kids who can go beyond that. You can ask them high-level, higher-order questions. And so that came out of my observations of that particular evaluation question in Danielson's rubric. You know, what is their level of questioning? And so we decided as a building, the teacher said, okay, come in and check it out. And then I brought back the data, and we saw, so we had to figure out how to ask 6-year-olds higher level order questions. Because
Yeah,
it's not intuitive, right? You know, you're like, ooh, they'll never answer that. Well, yeah, they actually can. And so, you know, it's that honest coaching conversation. It's not a got you, it's not punitive, it's really to provide you some feedback that you might not otherwise get.
yeah.
So,
And, I mean, I would assume there's always a chance that you see something, you're like, oh, that's really awesome.
it is.
Like, we
And when you
gotta,
celebrate it, and the best
and then you're like, well, we
models-
gotta, you
Tell
know,
everybody else about it.
yeah.
Correct, and, you know, practices of excellence are when you go in and you see it, and then you bring them to your faculty meeting and say, you gotta see this.
Yeah,
I mean, there were things that I saw as a principal that I couldn't, we were just talking about being elementary school teachers, like it's exhausting, literally. And
I
to
subbed
keep
to-
the momentum and stamina up of little people, it's, you know, it's like a cattle shoot, you're like, woo! But when you see it, you know it,
Yeah.
right? As an observer, you know it. And so you celebrate it and you share it because colleagues learn from each other.
Yeah.
That's just,
And even in just 30 minutes, today I covered a class at Hereford, that's what Andrew's talking about, second grade math, I needed to just sit in the fetal position for a while. I call my best friend who's a second grade teacher, I'm like, you're a superhero. But it was 35 minutes, teachers got to go watch another second grade teacher, and what they saw in 30 to 35 minutes will change their practice. Now, that's a learning walk, different than a walk through, but we're also allowing, well, encouraging teachers to go and do that, and where we can help cover, we do. I won't do that again. I've ruled out now kindergarten and second.
First grade's not easy either. He's the best little teacher in the whole world, but it will make you tired.
So the observations and stuff, are these planned or is it dropped? Where you're,
both.
okay.
So some are scheduled just to make sure, you know, that they know in fairness.
Right. But
And
it's also the top.
it could be, yeah, and it can be done by essentially anyone. We're all qualified to be, you know, observers.
It's not meant to be like punitive, it's supportive.
And it's been well received, I'm hoping.
I don't know, I haven't been in there yet. Really, the high school has
I'm
rolled
sure
it
it's a
out.
change.
You know what, yeah,
Sure,
it's
it's
a,
change.
that change will
Something
take
to
a while.
understand.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a transformation.
you gotta get people used to it, and you gotta like, when you talk about implementing it, you wanna implement it with like care, right? You wanna like,
And the high school went in and hit the ground the second week of school. And our elementary principals very thoughtfully, like, feel as though they need to have a soft entry and, you know, engage the staff and talk about the tool and unpack it, you know, and that, you know, we respect the autonomy of building principals to have that, know their staff, they know them best, and, you know, everybody, it's the same
Well, that gets to
process,
that
but the
care
entry
thing.
point may be a little
Yeah.
softer.
So they'll
Get
be-
to that
yeah,
care thing.
there'll be about a month until they have the chance to address their staff, and we'll start probably
Yeah.
a month from now.
And I think in fairness, especially in elementary, you're working so much, and now that you're there, on procedures and rules and, you know, getting the kids.
You're not in the nitty gritty yet.
Right, you know, high school kids come in, they're like, open book, yeah, like, here we go.
You gotta, like, warm up.
Pythagorean theorem, here we go. You know, and so it's just a different.
It is,
different
yeah.
mindset.
yeah, seeing the homework that Parker and Quinn get and seeing what you see in the elementary school, it's definitely different.
Correct.
Just a little.
Yeah. So, but that will be part of their feedback, because walkthroughs is an action step in the GSI plan. What are common themes that you have observed? What are common strengths? What are some of the challenges, and what are you doing about it? That's the question.
What are you doing?
And so what? Data is always about what's next, so what? And not in a mean way, but like, so what?
Yeah.
Why does that matter?
Right.
So.
Okay, cool, thanks.
welcome.
All right, SEL screener update.
I'm so excited about
I
that.
know you're excited about this.
I mean, it's fair to say, if you work at Everett Park and you receive my emails, I talk about this very passionately. And so there's been a lot of question around SEL, its value, how it's going to actually be used, what does it look like. And so I would have loved for people to come, but you guys are here, so this is exciting, right? So I won't show you all the videos unless you want to see them about what SEL is like. No. I'll leave it when I post them up. But essentially, really quickly, I won't show you the videos. But SEL, last year, as part of the comprehensive planning process, our pupil services team looked at 26 potential screeners, right? So in our academic world, we have benchmarks for all of our assessed areas and literacy. And so one of the common challenges around behavior, and remember, SEL is really sort of foundational to decision making. It's based on 5 CASEL competencies, which are up there: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision making. So those skill sets are fundamental to a lot of academic learning skills, but also pro-social behaviors.
Treat other people like you want to be treated?
Correct. And so when we unpack, and you're going to actually see the questions we ask. So we did have about 85 students opt out of the screener. But we are almost, actually, the middle school was last, they were today. We have distributed the screener to all students. And so this is actual real-time data that I'll show you. And so everything that when we set out on this journey to deploy a universal screener always comes back to this. Everyone's favorite conversation, MTSS. 5 years, Kim, 5, 4?
This is like my 5th year, and you
Okay.
were well into it when I
Yeah, so 5 years ago, it's changed though, we've modified it over time. Fundamentally, we're working off this framework, which is 80-15-5, right? So 80% of our kids, or 85%, we're always trying to get most of the kids having the skills they need in the necessary grade level around the skill. And then, what's our middle group who need a little support, and then what's our highest degree of support. So I bring this up because I want to show you how we are using SEL screener data in this framework.
Okay.
And the things that we're asking and why we're actually giving the screener. Why would you need to do that? And I think when you see some of the questions, you'll understand from an instructional perspective why knowing if kids are off target or don't possess those skills is really important to classroom and their academic success, quite frankly. So there is a lot of things here for you. There's a lot of things here for you, but I want to give you an example, and I'm sorry. Listen, I did it. Okay, so this is the framework, but truthfully, who is doing this work? Oftentimes, it's in the academic arena, it's our math specialists, reading specialists, our coaches, and our classroom teachers. This process, it's the same, right? We live in the same framework, but it's really our pupil services team and our special education teachers. And I'll explain why that is. And so we have established a data protocol in the district, and it looks like this. So we've collected over the course of the first several weeks of school all student surveys and teacher surveys. And so we're asking a series of questions around their observations, whether they be about themselves, if they're a student, or a teacher to student. And so these are the areas that the questions are aligned to. They're aligned to self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. And the survey responses are Likert-based, and when the output is in an SEL composite, but there's also emotional behavioral concern questions. And the dichotomy there, the difference is, and this is working with our teachers, is SEL is our school counselors. You know, it's our second step curriculum, it's some of our PBIS framework is all around SEL. Emotional behavioral concerns are internalizing or externalizing. Those are, that is particularly important to our student assistance counselors and our special ed teachers working with students who may have some behavioral issues and or mental health needs that, you know, move them into a protected IDEA special education evaluation. And so this tool allows us to collect data on all students and then sort by how is everyone doing, what do some kids need, and what happens to our highest need students. And so I just wanted to give you an example, and this is Hereford's data. And so this document is just a series of questions our counselors ask themselves. And really, it's what is the purpose of a universal screener, right? So they look at the data and then complete this. What are the strengths and needs that I observed? So this is an example. I know it's a lot. This document here. This is Hereford's responses. All of her.
Oh.
It's all of her. Now, it's only third grade. Oh. It's only third grade because really students below age should not really think, well, they may not be able to read it. Let's just be honest about it.
Sure.
And so,
This is just students and teachers out.
correct.
Okay.
No parents yet.
No parents.
No parents yet. So the questions we ask at this phase of data inquiry are, you know, just in general, what are your observations around this data? So we have the SEL performance. There's student on the top and teacher on the bottom. So it's around the same cohort of kids. So if you look at emerging, just look at the first yellow column. We ask ourselves, so 0 students reported themselves as having emerging SEL skills, while teachers reported that almost 10%, like there's 10% of the third graders that they observed that have some concerns in that skill set.
Right.
So how kids perceive themselves and how teachers perceive kids is a little bit different, right? Developing. And so as you go down the continuum, you know, this will be the first, and I'm going to say, this will be the first time our counselors are looking at data like this. It's a lot. And, you know, those of us who have been classroom teachers or building administrators or have done data work, it's pretty common for us to look at this. This is very foreign for them. And so you'll see the goal is 80%, right? Because that's sort of the MTSS framework. Now, students believe, I mean, they're 92. I mean, they're rocking it out. They feel great about their SEL performance in third grade.
That's good.
The teachers,
Not so.
not so much, right? So then we start asking ourselves database questions like, why might that be? Who represents the 9.9%? And so it starts leading us down the rabbit hole in a very objective way. We often hear, oh my gosh, they're awful, right? And I don't mean it, but like, oh, can't sit still, can't do this. Well, what do you mean? What does that mean? And I am notorious for saying, I'm sorry, I don't know what that means. Can you explain that to me? What behavior, what skill? And so this allows us just sort of that big picture. How do kids feel? How do teachers feel? So when you navigate over to the right on this, you'll see that the emotional behavioral concern areas. you will see it's a little bit different, right? The first one is about internalizing behaviors. So, if you're depressed or you're anxious, you're withdrawn, you don't want to participate with your friends. And so teachers, in a very different way,
Yeah, flip-flop there.
That's interesting.
correct, right? So data isn't always as clean as you want it to be, which leads to more inquiry, right? So, however, kids' responses to similar questions, they're reporting, they're documenting, this is how I feel, which puts them in a concern like, maybe you don't know how to ask for help.
Right.
Right.
And so externalizing, again, I just want to say, we've heard about elementary school behavior for a really long time. Well, what teachers reported in this fall, now I suspect maybe at mid-year it might increase and we'll look at that, but they're saying right now they're not seeing a lot of children who demonstrate that externalizing behavior need, where kids are reporting behaviors of themselves that would fall into that category, right? So this is just the tip of the iceberg, but now, so the question is, well, what does that all mean? And so behind it is an item analysis. And we won't go through all of it, but,
But she wants to.
I mean, this is,
Can I ask you 2 questions?
sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so the first one, so the teachers filling this out, like, when did they do this?
Correct, so essentially,
You know where I'm going with it,
3
like-
weeks in. You can't do it in week 1 or week 2.
Right.
So they did it in week 3. Last Friday, we spent a lot of time. So last week, the bulk of it was done,
Okay.
which is pretty early.
Right. So,
It's still early.
because I wonder if like even some of them might have a preconceived notion or something like that. If like I'm 2nd grade and you're 3rd grade, I'm like, well, you're getting tinny. Good luck next year, you know?
Yep, and we'll talk about that
Yeah.
because that does happen, right? I mean, that happens. You know the kid, and I was a high school ES teacher. I knew the kid coming into the high school before the kid knew they were coming to the high school. But this is, that does happen, and how do we really take a non-biased, objective look about, are those concerns valid? And if they are valid, what do they actually mean? What skills is that child missing? And so these are just examples of the question. So,
I wasn't done yet.
oh,
No,
sorry,
no,
I'm
no.
sorry.
Still on the first page, sorry.
Oh, see, look how exciting
The response rate
it is.
for students, 21%.
So
Is that?
it takes all of Hereford's population, but
Okay.
we had 114 third graders, which is almost the
Okay.
representative of the
Oh.
whole class.
So it is representative sample.
Correct, correct.
Okay, all right.
It gives you the whole, like even teachers, yeah, it's weird, right?
Yeah.
And that's, Jeff goes, I don't know if I'm, like, there are
Yeah.
536 third graders, I'm like, I know, I don't know why it does that. And so Ally had 94 and she has 102 third graders, but it gave her whole building. It's strange,
It is.
yeah.
Okay.
Dr. Brenda, what's an example of externalizing? You explained the internalizing. What's an
Um,
example of that behavior?
So essentially,
Just-
I'm gonna have a
Outward
conflict.
behavior.
I'm gonna,
Yeah.
I'm gonna act out, it's exactly what you
It's all
imagine,
that
like,
physical.
Yeah.
That's what we said.
Yelling.
Just being an ES teacher with K-2 children.
Yeah, I get it. I just wanted to be sure it was what I
correct.
thought it
And
was.
interestingly, some of the other data we talk about, is the PA climate survey. And the question in 3rd, middle, and high school that is consistent is, I know how to handle conflict. One of the questions that is always, is up the flagpole is, it's okay to fight when you disagree, right? So we're looking at externalizing behavior and trying to say, very early, do you possess the skills, the coping mechanisms, or are you going fisticuffs right out of the gate?
Yeah.
Right? PBIS will be shaped on what are our observations that everyone needs. So Jeff and I started looking at his data today, and these are the item analysis around the areas. And so, for responsible decision making, if you look, there is a small, and I could pull it up if you want, but there's small pockets of kids who don't do that, right? They don't follow school rules. So the question is, how do we reinforce it with those kids? Now, I can't pull the report up and drill down to the student names because I'm not allowed to show you them.
Right, yeah.
But those are the kinds of questions. So it gives counselors and principals the opportunity to look at kids who may be struggling in that area and say, okay, what could we do here as a PBIS team in order to reinforce rule following? And so as we look at this, it gives us some big picture ideas of what our whole school efforts in certain areas. Does that make sense?
And this
So
is,
how-
sho-
go ahead, Mike.
no, go ahead, Jake.
So like, how do they answer this question? Like the first question is, I look at people when I talk to them, is it one of those like sometimes, always,
Yeah,
never?
let me show you.
Bring it
I
up.
gotta show you. I gotta show you.
Bring it up.
I get so excited.
I want to see.
Sorry.
No, I think it's
We're ordering
great. I
pizza or
think it's
something, right? It's interesting to me, this, because you're gonna bring it up,
I do want to be a student.
how some people actually fill out. We used to have this, I worked as a manager, and we would hire people, and you'd get those self-surveys that people would send in, like,
Myers-Briggs.
yeah, like, how often is it okay to steal? Sometimes. And you're like, we're not gonna hire you. But I appreciate the honesty for,
Yes.
the 4 kids that said, yeah, well, if you go down to like the responsible decision making, I'm careful in using things that aren't mine. There's a lot, there's obviously a handful of kids that said, nope.
Correct. Well, and it's interesting, right? Some people may I look at people when I talk to them and think, who cares?
Yeah.
But we do care,
Uh-huh.
right? We do.
Oh, yeah.
We know that for employability later on in life, you have to be able to look people in the eye and have a conversation. And so, I share these questions with you because there's really nothing, earth-shattering. It's really about pro-social behavior, like what
Yeah.
we know makes you a good citizen. And so, it is that Likert, let's see, which one would you, I follow school rules, right?
Yeah.
A little.
It's a little
A
true.
little true.
It might be a little true. But it just becomes an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
You sort of told on yourself, but,
Right.
and we know,
But then there's no not true answers there,
correct.
which is,
Well, there is a never. Teachers get to say never. So.
But they're talking about the whole class when they're saying that?
No,
No,
they
they have
do
to
one
do this
for
for each
every
child.
student.
For each
Ah.
student.
Yeah.
So it takes,
Okay.
I heard them say about 2 to 3 minutes, right?
Per
child.
Yeah.
And a couple of them said it took them a little bit over an hour, hour and a half to do their whole class, so it takes a little longer. I think they're being really helpful, so they
Yeah.
competed for every student. We gave them a little time, not enough time
Yeah,
on Friday,
that's a lot.
but
Wow.
I ask for help
I did not
when I
realize
need
that's
it.
all. Okay.
mm,
So, these are just some things. There's things we can do to support kids. There's strategies we can deploy school-wide in order to, intentionally design our behavioral support systems to help kids. We can reteach or overteach skills in second step, morning meeting, those types of opportunities at the elementary school to really help. This is the same type of data we get for middle and high school too. The numbers look a little different.
I'm sure they do.
Yeah. But, this is an example of one, and Art, who was in the data, he's like, you need to give the item analysis to all my teachers. I need them to see, what kids are saying. So,
Yeah.
they really, want to have those conversations. Some of our efforts, responsive classroom, are really around, I know how to forgive. I can handle a conflict. I have concern for others. And so here are your internalizing behaviors. I feel lonely. I feel nervous. I feel sad. No one cares about me.
Oh.
And so those are indicators, and so we might be doing groups around expressing your emotions. You know, asking for help, and then externalizing, here you go, I break the rules, I fight with others. I don't let anybody join my group with friends, like those, disobey.
That's a lot.
Yeah, so those are things, I mean, if you're like, yeah, that's me, we're like, well,
You want that, though.
Right,
At least
correct.
You want that first answer to be high.
correct, you want not true, because
Correct.
it's
I break the
essentially
rules,
not true. Not true. You know, but when you're dealing with like, it was a little bit true, and you got 7 kids at Hereford who want to fight, you know, you're like, whoa, that's 7 kids who can create this is just their grade. You know, what homeroom are they in? Let's make sure they're not together. How do we, you know? So,
You know it's yours.
and so what we asked teachers to do and our counseling team to do with our special ed teachers, because there sometimes is definitely an overlap if you lack social skills. Sometimes it's by the nature of your disability, right? Students with autism
Yes.
sometimes struggle with that. Students with conduct disorders most certainly struggle with that. And so, you know, it was nice, last Friday, we spent the afternoon working as a pupil services and special ed team because they share in supporting students. And that they created and fostered dialogue around that. So if I could show you a couple other reports, there's a lot. I mean, you could, well,
Yes, so what are these?
so this
Oh,
is.
sorry.
go ahead.
No, it's
Wait,
okay.
hold on.
Yeah.
Emily has a question.
No, because mine's on this next one, and I think yours is on.
Okay, so just on this one, just to go back for a second.
Yep.
Like where it says, I feel lonely. When we look at these answers, it's always never a little, a lot, all the time.
Yeah,
right?
it would be not true. So like
Okay.
51% or 59 kids said, no, that's not true.
Okay, cool.
Right, they're inverse, they're opposite. The SEL questions to
That
the,
high number for that.
And well, at first I was like, what? I was like, wait a second.
That's the
Yeah.
opposite.
So it's always,
you know, and I think what's interesting is we try to start with the most and then whittle it down through additional data sets. So what I can't show you is I can actually go in by student, and that's the very last data that I'll show you, but it's sort of anonymous. By every
Right.
question they answered to see how they responded. And so the challenge of what can I do for everyone? How can I create groups for common needs? And then what happens to that poor kid who is a concern in all arenas? And, you know, hopefully it's data our teams, special ed teachers can use, but how about, little Susie, who nobody saw that she needed it. And she's an internalizer, and everything is a concern. Like, how are we helping her? And so it's really, because kids, I do feel very strongly kids do authentically respond to these things, even though I know often people challenge that it's not.
it's.
I think this shows that, Andrea. I don't know what
Correct.
page this is, but the difference between the teacher concern and the student concern. The teacher's good, right? Look at the discrepancy there. It's not huge, but that represents children. So the teacher is not seeing something. And JP, to your point, it's early.
Right, they
But
don't-
we
they
have
might
to be
not know yet.
aware that,
Correct.
right, but we
Yeah.
have to be aware that there is that misperception, and we can see who they are instead of wondering.
And that may grow as they're
Yeah.
schools
Yeah.
and years.
And we haven't had a chance to be proactive before. This is the opportunity to be
Yes.
proactive rather than just react when they get there.
So
And
I mean,
at K-12.
it is interesting. So
Yeah.
this is the emotional behavior, the one that Kim's looking at. And, you know, there are 11% of kids who responded in ways that said they're internalizing. And honestly, it's so easy for us to identify externalizing behavior. We've all heard it. We've all heard it
Yeah.
in meetings and board settings and on your board meetings. Like, you hear those
Yeah.
things, right? What is sometimes really shocking is what kids are holding on, right? We talk about their backpack and what's in their backpack and what trauma
Yeah.
they've experienced. This is a place for them to, with, some degree of ease, say, this is how I feel. And then, we have to ask those questions. 11% of students in 3rd grade at Hereford responded in a way about internalizing behavior. Wow. And truthfully, that's a lot. And so this is, Emily, to your question, we always set that goal, 85% of our group, because we know that we're always dealing with some sort of outlier group. And so it looks really good, but we watch it over time as our efforts, externalizing behavior. This would be a great way for Jeff and his teachers to monitor the impact of PBIS.
So this is showing for the student responses. I guess I'm trying to understand the difference between the two pages.
They might not be, it's just
Okay.
the way that they, you got communication.
No,
These
one-
are externalizing and internalizing. These are single student responses. This just compares these to the teacher's responses.
Okay.
Yeah. So when kids responded to the externalizing levels, this is 89.4% said they don't, like the way they responded would not be of concern.
Okay.
Some are possible, 5 and 5% are concerned. Like their answers
Got it.
are aligned with something we should be concerned about.
Externalizing and internalizing.
Yeah,
too.
internalizing is higher, yes.
Do you,
know what's going on.
because obviously you guys can see the names of the students and stuff like that. So so obviously you can see if the kids are on both or the kids that outlie. So how often do external and internal match up?
Yeah, I mean, I have to look, I don't have that. So what I can do and what I will do is you can run risk reports, which are when you see, so I can run a report by student, and you'll see how they responded, and some are straight red.
Right.
So all of the components are red. Now, that is a child who is at risk,
Yeah.
right? And so that is a child who, in our framework, becomes a focus list, like what services are they getting? Have they had any? Who's doing what? How are we going to support them? How do we engage the family? Now, ironically, there are some where we've looked at a little bit of data and said, the kid is reporting this. The teacher said everything's great. I wonder what the parent thinks.
Yeah.
And we can send a parent survey. What are they saying? Because truth be told, we have all, there are kids who behave very differently at home than they do at school.
Yes.
And vice versa. And so, the parent input, Art said to me today, let's go, I'm sending this parent survey, because this kid, we want to give him out, let's go, I want to know what the parent thinks. So just by nature of engagement, hey, and this last report shows you. So when you hear that we're asking a lot from our counselors and psychologists and special ed teachers, we're giving them, it's data. So this very last one, it says student detail.
Okay.
This is the output for an individual student. And so this is an example.
So each student that has this sheet
Correct.
on them.
Correct. And so it gives you a picture of their SEL skills, internalizing behavior and emotional behavior from the student's perspective and the teacher's. And so now how does this work and why is this important? Part of our MTSS process is having meetings where teachers or principals or staff members bring a child to child study and say, hey, these are my observations. What types of supports is this child? I'm concerned. So we'll take a look at that because we want to know, right? In this particular student's case, the child believes they're competent in the SEL skills. And if you look at the second page, this is the difference and where the difference was.
Wow.
Right, so if you're looking at that,
For this particular student.
for this
down to the
student, so when you break it down by competency, well, there seems to be a little bit of a mismatch in the kid's self-awareness, right? And so, which is probably maybe why they rated themselves so high, right? So, it will be interesting once, if we give that to the parent, what is the parent saying
Well,
in these domains?
yeah, And when you give it to the parent, do you then share the results with the parent that the
Yes.
teacher and the student have as well?
Oh, yeah,
I can't imagine what that, I mean, that's got to be eye-opening for the parent
Right.
then as well to.
but I think it gives us the ability to have meaningful conversations
Oh, yeah.
around the skill. So.
And it's very like objective, like you're.
Correct.
These are.
Your child has a lot
Yeah.
of great skills, like there are competencies there. You know, I might be a little concerned about self-awareness and what does that mean? And we'd love to, you know, send the counselor in, and if there's a lot of kids in a single class with some of these issues where they're common, let's get in there, let's pre-teach and over-teach us self-awareness. Like, what does that even mean? And ironically, so you see self-awareness and responsible decision-making on the two flanks. Well, guess where else? The kid said, the child reported externalizing behavior as a possible concern. The teacher said fine. So that's a data inquiry question.
Right.
So what was a concern in these areas? What questions did you respond? Like, how did you answer this? But they're externalizing behavior. So they're managing themselves. So what did you mean by this, teacher?
Yeah.
What is that conversation? What are you observing, right? So, we're in its infancy. We're just completing data collection now. Between now and October, I'm working, I have like pop-up consultation times at every building to help them get through this. This is a lot for counselors. I can tell you that. I mean, they're like, what? You want me to what? But you are as much of a coach and a teacher to kids and staff as our other specialists are. Special ed teachers are getting a little more granular. So in the back of this data inquiry kit, you'll see step 3 is really targeted for our student assistance counselors and our special ed teachers to ask much more specific questions. Is SEL I'm sorry, I should really number.
No,
It's okay.
step 3, it's good.
Yeah.
They have to ask a little more specific question in order, and I believe this enhances CSI too. Is the instruction I'm providing targeted? Is it effective? Can I measure it? And this tool allows us to make some of those decisions. The other piece of this, which should be and likely is familiar on the next page of that, here are your social skills, here's your externalizing behavior, how do we follow up? But as we shared in TSI, the data, what other risk factors are present for you?
Right. Days absent, discipline referrals, this is all good stuff.
What is the profile, and what are all your risk factors, and how do we
Yeah.
make sure we're addressing them all? And so we started this, we had a really long PD day last Friday with that group, working with them between now and the 9th, and then the 9th we're back together to really sort of make sure they understand the data.
And can present it. That's a big. And I
So,
think.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
One of the things that I just need to pull together for everybody, because I think it's really critical. When you look at this is for our academic needs of students, this is for social, emotional, and this is for behavioral. We've been doing a ton of academic work, and now we have a screener where we can be more proactive with mental health and social and emotional issues. Those are the 3 areas that need to be targeted in a good MTSS program. We realized pulling all these together after 5 years of digging into academic is a challenge. We brought the MCIU in to kind of help us walk through this, and they said, you're the only district in the county who's moving in this direction, who's this far ahead, to be able to be pulling these things together in a very tangible, purposeful way. And it won't be easy, because we have to figure out on October 9th, how much time are we spending here? How much time are we spending here?
There's only so
This
much
will
time.
inform academics. Academics will inform this screener, this one. So we have to really get good at pulling all this information together and using it as overlays of really getting to the root cause of student behavior. So I'm saying that to say, as Andrea just did, this is in its infancy. We get MTSS, we've been doing all the things, but to grow all of our skills in layering that together in a way that really is impactful for kids will take a little time.
It will be so much work, as you're both saying. I mean, where are you at the end of the year? Where are you 2 years from now? Because as you just said, academically, the focus on getting kids to do well. But in reality, if these other pieces, social, emotional, behavioral aren't there, I'm not quite sure how we would ever get those kids. And they're not all special ed, but some of them are. How do we get them up here if we don't solve some of these problems? Do you know what I mean? That's how it's just so, everything just weaves together in a perfect way.
Yeah, I appreciated Ally's comment today. She said, remember when we did this with teachers, they weren't comfortable with this. Now, 3 years in, they're like, yep. So, we'll get there. But there's a lot happening for the good of kids. It's overwhelming.
And really, when you think about the educational landscape, this is aligned to being trauma-informed and trauma-responsive. And that is, what is in a child's backpack? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? What skills do they have? And then, how do we help them?
Yeah.
And I think it's so important, what you said too, about how guidance counselors, they're obviously doing all this great work, but part of, they can't do it all themselves. So being that coach, like you're saying, is really using this to inform, to coach and train the teachers on how to, because one guidance counselor cannot, right? Two guidance counselors cannot do the work that, so they need to train the teachers to be able to work in that way as well.
And even having the confidence to be the expert and coach up their colleagues.
Yeah.
And that is huge.
Right.
And that's a shift, right?
Right.
That's a huge shift. And, what strategy could we use if a teacher sees that they have 5 kids who have no self-regulation? What could we offer that teacher as something they can do as a matter of practice to reinforce that skill, to teach that skill? And, to do this took 3 years in the academic world, and we're still working out the kinks, right? So this is year 1. So, but I'm excited because at the very end of this, when you look at a student's profile, so just so you know, all students get it at the beginning and end of the year.
Teachers?
Teachers and students will
Okay.
do it twice a year. Any student who comes to Child Study, any student who has a IEP, a 504 plan, or it comes to Child Study with some academic or behavioral needs, we will repeat it at probably increments around 9 weeks to see if there's an impact on the instruction that we're providing. And that's what they hear from me, and special ed teachers included. They say, oh, I ran this 9-week group. I'm like, how'd it go? And they look at me like, what? I'm like, how'd it go? Oh, they came every day, they participated. I'm like, so how'd it go? Like I'm asking them to show me evidence that it happened and impact data. And so when you look at that individual student report, the very last part, which is nice, and I feel like they are grateful for this, because this is the hard part.
There's nothing on it yet, but you'll see what it could be. Yeah.
So you're going to see the scores over time. Every time they're rated, you'll see if it increases, whether the student believes that, or the teacher believes that, or even the parent.
Oh, like a growth chart.
Correct.
You did with the doctor.
And there's a metric behind it around rate of change, and if there was a change index, like is it a positive change? And so, that's helpful. They don't have to do that work. A lot of teachers, and special ed teachers included, are creating progress monitoring and evaluating growth, and this just creates an opportunity for this process to do it. So that's a lot.
That is, it's fantastic.
So and I will tell you that Andrew's done the lion's share, as I'm sure you probably already figured out, with great help of her colleagues at the end of the table and the teachers, but it's a lot, and it's a lot to present to people who are feeling frightened, so. It's really good work.
There was a lot of this.
So even though all this is new and the data's new, are we still acting on it though? If we see that huge gap between the student and teacher, one way or another, we're still reacting to it and.
Yeah, I mean, this is meant to find the outliers, just like our benchmark academic data is meant to find the outliers. You used that word before. This, we know who to look at now. We're not gonna look at every kid and create an action plan for every child, but the ones that Andrea mentioned are the outliers here are the ones that we'll dig into right away. Of course, there's actionable data, yeah. We'll just get more comfortable with it and better, you know.
And from a program perspective, you know, and this is our responsibility very often, is to take a look at that data, you know, 30,000 feet and say, do we have effective intervention resources, materials in order to address the common areas we see with kids? And so what you don't see is this process, there's an intervention matrix that we all started working on. You know, if I see a deficit in self-regulation, what is the intervention that I can deploy? How do I measure it as it's happening? And then when I re-administer the survey, I can determine if it worked. And so there's entrance criteria, exit criteria, and progress monitoring that we're trying to build. That's all. All right.
Cool.
And I told you, I said to Mike, we could just do this today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we could have really done this.
All right, so what's the emergency communication and demonstration?
Yep, so I'll, so exciting.
Let's go.
Yes, so Crisis Go, but more importantly,
Fail.
thank you. Unroll.
Sure.
We got enrolled for Crisis Go already.
The standard response protocol from I Love You Guys. So we trained all our teachers. We started last May. If you look at our website, you will see we started really publishing it. We put it as our forward-facing emergency preparedness. What we have with this is, it's really the manner in which we address any school safety issue. They are not all the same. You've heard about Alice for years and years, but that is really a single scenario-based response protocol. It's the worst case scenario. So we've been practicing that, and what we realized, and truthfully, it dawned on us last year at Marlboro when we had an incident where
Yep.
the Marlboro police, right, and you know, because you got an email about it.
Yeah.
I know you did, and so, and Marlboro's
the
going into
response time?
lockdown.
Oh,
Right?
which incident, I guess.
No, this is, yeah, you know, Marlboro.
I'll tell you later.
Okay.
You know, and you know, the police call us and say that. We just saw it unfold over Labor Day with many neighboring school districts with the escapee. Well, so they told us to call a lockdown, but there was no threat. So there was some police activity, and we used the word lockdown, and it created anxiety.
Well, yeah, because
Unnecessary.
lockdown is like,
Correct, it's panic.
well, that's what's so cool about this is you have these like
Correct.
levels.
Levels, yeah.
As opposed to Alice that was like, lockdown.
Correct.
All of them.
So I
Yeah.
just want to show you that this is what we've been working on rolling out. This is what is on our website. This is what Alexis shared with families. But I just want to reiterate, we now have several operational decisions. So a hold just means, and I can give you an example. Right, it's on the back of our ID badges,
Oh,
even
good.
student ID badges.
Very good.
If you see student ID badges, they now have them on there. But a hold is just, there's something happening in the building, we need all the kids to stay out of the hallway, go about your business.
And
Keep
that could be
teaching.
that someone broke their leg and they need the
That's
ambulance to come.
exactly the
Like with
scenario
that.
I would provide. And so that's a hold, or there is
Secure.
they're secure. So secure means we're locking the doors. If you're outside, you come in, no one is allowed in the building.
Is that what we did last week with the travel content?
It was modified, Alan made a modified.
Yeah, yes, he modified it.
Modified secure.
He can
It's
do that.
secure.
Made it up.
He made it up?
He said, I had made it modified. I'm like, what?
Secure
with But secure, yes, the pretense is we're in the building, business as usual, no one in or out. Sign goes up on the door because a parent is gonna wanna come in, and the answer is, I'm sorry, you can't do that.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to wait. And so, you know, we also have a messaging system in Parent Square when we would say, we're in the secure, you saw it. The modified was a little different because we did allow people, because there was quite a bit of distance to the actual escapee. Lockdown is exactly what you're used to. We would be making decisions, lock slates out of sight, or you would use your Alice protocol depending on the nature of the incident. Evacuate means we gotta get out of the building. The bomb scares are sort of notorious for evacuations. And shelter is your classic weather emergency, essentially. This is what, you know, is forward-facing around what you do, what kids do, and then we also added, and some of our youngest learners we've had to teach what these mean to them, but teachers also have a tool now on their phones or on all their laptops, and this is really scary, but it's our internal crisis communication system. So from our dashboards, I always struggle to.
I know.
No, I'm not gonna.
No, don't set it off.
I'm not gonna set it off.
Set
I'm not gonna set it off.
it off.
So on our dashboards, we have the ability to communicate real time. We can, if I could, I have a mouse. Jimmy, what's your problem, lady?
We just know you technology.
Yeah, it's terrible, right?
Jim.
So
Is it hot?
this is,
How?
so teachers can activate this from their desktop, but it's an internal communication system. And if you've ever been in a school building or in any kind of emergency situation, the first question you as somebody who's in that is, what's happening?
Right.
And so the goal is to be able to have real-time communication, which we can. This is loud. It has been practiced. If you have children here, I'm sure they have shared the beeps and the loud noises. So it's a little bit of a difference. There's also two other options, a medical emergency. We've asked staff to lock their doors as a #1 safety precaution for lots of reasons. But if there is a child who needs a medical assistance, staff can push that on their phone or on their desktop, and it summons the safety team and the school nurse
To that
to the
location?
classroom, to the location.
Okay.
And
And all they have to do is push that.
correct, and they can
They know
add
where they are.
information. Correct.
Okay.
And then staff assist if there's something not of a threatening nature, but we need to get people to the room. We can do that. It also goes to the safety team and, which includes security, building principal. So I share that because, it's a work in progress. It will all lead to reunification, which is the second form, and there'll be more to come. I just want to say now, by the end of the year, our goal is to conduct reunification, both on-site within the building
Oh,
and try and attempt an off-site reunification
That's a
where
good idea.
we would move a whole building of students and reunify them with their families.
Wow.
I suspect it'll be voluntary. We'll be very strategic about when we do it.
right.
And we'll give much, much, much advance notice. Thus, I'm saying in September, and it's probably going to happen in May.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, really, it's around safety and security, and I'm hoping there's a willingness of families to do it. It is not convenient, but it is to be prepared for, very unfortunate circumstances.
And the reality of the situation is, this happens way too much.
That's correct.
And how can we be ready for it? God forbid it happens. That's what all this is about.
Well, and you know, being in the district as long as I am, and I think many of you will know, we had a reunification a couple of years, actually the first year I got here, and it did not go smoothly.
What building
Was
is
it the
that?
firehouse in high school?
Yeah.
And so we don't want to recreate that for our families.
No.
It's about safety, it's about accountability, it's about providing comfort and support. And, you know, we've had to think very thoughtfully about reunification. We have a district reunification team. We've engaged the ministerium because if there is some sort of counseling, if there's a loss of a student, real time. We're working with our police entities. They can have access to Crisis Go and have real-time information. In the Crisis Go platform, which is our communication tool, they would have access to our building maps. It gives GPS locations on the last report of where it needs to be. Our staff takes attendance through Crisis Go.
Yep.
So we can account for every student through the portal. And so we have real-time information that we have as administrative staff, and we can share with our security personnel and local municipal police. So they know in an event who's accounted for and who is not in real time. Which is, you know, I have said to staff, and Mike saw my presentation, you know, we want every kid to go.
Mhm.
And so that's really important to me, accountability. And quite frankly, for staff too,
Yeah.
you know. So there's much, much more to come. You will see this again, but that on the long-term planning wise, you know, you can expect to get some information about that.
Is the Crisis Go just on the teacher's laptops, or is it available on their phone?
They can download it on their phone if they choose.
Okay.
It's highly encouraged.
It is encouraged.
Yeah, I would think so.
Because really it's
Yeah.
Have it too?
Yes.
Good.
Well, we're working on it. Now that we know all their names, and there's a little bit of to get police in and to get contracted folks in, it's a little bit different
It's
process.
understaffed.
But the answer is yes, and they can monitor the dashboard. In their, every building has a security office adjacent to a restroom, private restroom, and so they have the capacity to view the dashboard on their computers.
It's fantastic, and I think it's very unfortunate that there's no one here hearing any of this from the community. And so I think for both SEL and this piece, and I don't know what else we can talk about, but so far, the first two things
Yeah.
are incredibly important, incredibly hot button items that is very unfortunate that,
We hear so often, what are you doing to keep the kids safe? What are you doing to keep the kids safe? And both these pieces are to keep the kids safe, you know?
yeah, well.
And it's been very purposeful, what the district has tried to do over the years to get to a spot where we're trying to, you know, see their needs, but keep them safe if it's something that we can't control, I think. So, having kids in the district, you know, been around here for a while now, so. Thank you. Any questions about that one? Any other ones? All right, cool. Let's, special education update, age of eligibility.
So I think you've all received some brief updates in regards to age of eligibility, and I think you also are aware of what we've done to date, the communication from PD and Bureau of Special Education. An update was, I believe, on September 11th, the Pennsylvania School Boards Association, who were joined with 3 school districts. One was Pittsburgh, one was Central Bucks, and another was, I think it was Upper Darby, all joined together, and they submitted a petition to basically put a hold on this until it's fully reviewed and looked at. And that's just an additional update that had been shared with school districts back in September. So right now, where we are with age of eligibility in 23-24, we actually have 2 students, which is a low number, that it would impact. One is an out-of-district student, and one is a student who was participating in our work program. Both students did graduate and did exit in June. So in special ed, it's a NORAP. So they exited through a graduation NORAP. However, that doesn't necessarily matter. It is the choice of the parent if they do request their child to come back. You saw all the process from PDE in the letter and then our communications. It is listed on our website under special education now, under age of eligibility, just to share information. What I can state is we do have currently one student who has returned. The student is working with sports coordination on the outside, and it's been relatively clear to us and to the parent as well, so I've talked with her and met with her, that nothing will be, it won't be heard if she does, if the student returns to school. It's also a possibility that, because they are working on part-time job with supports, things like that. We may, obviously, if it comes up and the student gets a part-time job, the student's day may change here. But that's always been the case for some of our kids, and that's fine. The second student, there has been consistent follow-up, email, phone calls, PDE's letter that had gone out, and no follow-up in that end. I will just say generally, I did get a notification today from the Bureau of Special Ed in regards to the second student. So that was positive information that I got in regards to the student. So there's certain steps. It is possible the student actually is not living here anymore, the family. But we're waiting to get more details on that. The bigger impact I'll just share, and then I'll sort of wrap it up for now, is I think it was shared with you as well, every year is a different year. So next year it looks a lot different. If we were to have done, if it was next year when this occurred, there are 6 students that could return. If you look at a low incident program, for example, our autistic support program at the high school, typically it will not be over 8 students. And 8 students, depending on what some of those needs are, is a high number. It could be an additional teacher, an additional program, depending on what that looks like. Obviously, we're not a district that's a North Penn with numbers or Central Bucks, which could obviously be a big impact. But for us, it could be an impact there, it could be a budgeting impact, but we'll just have to see what does occur.
And I think that's, the important nuance is that, we've always operated on the 21.
Yep.
And so any student who remains or returns to us is not budgeted for.
Right.
And typically returning at that age is a student with some complex needs and requires support. And so, I think that's a little bit of the pushback. And of course, there was a lot of criticism around our timing. To notify districts Thursday before a holiday and expect it to be implemented the Tuesday. It's really, it's problematic.
Bureaucracy.
Yeah, it's problematic. So, Carol and Amy have done their due diligence and we'll keep you, updated on anything else. Do I think it'll change? Nope, they told us this is kind of what it is.
This is gonna be it, but what I will say is I don't think the full impact of it has really, I don't think it's been fully vented yet, even though we had to start this and offer this as of, September 5th. There are so many other things coming out that it has an impact on. So I think there's a lot of more information that we'll have to look at. The only thing I'll just add, those 6 kids we're talking about next year, one of those students also is an out-of-district student, and I will say that program, if we look at our Act 16 numbers and our high costs for students, potentially that's one of the high-level students in our categories.
And that's a staffing, that's a personnel conversation, because you can only have so many students. So the longer they stay, we're going to max out those classes and need additional staff. I mean, ultimately, that's going to be the expense that we incur.
Yeah.
And
But it's
truthfully.
not unique to us. It's going
No,
to
it's
be
not. It's,
across the board for everybody.
And historically, those are difficult positions to fill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we've got to think about,
Takes a special person.
we've got to think about that.
And the last thing, the funding too. one would have assumed that for access and login and where we do get funds back,
Reimbursement.
these students now with this permanent change, that we would have been able to work to use these students with logging. We cannot, we are not permitted to at this point, as we are with kids up to age 21.
So we don't get reimbursement.
We get no reimbursement.
So, there's some, okay.
Okay, policy reminders and updates.
So I am taking a moment just because I want to publicly talk a little bit and remind families about our policy. Attendance now, it comes out through Parent Square, you know, it used to come out through Skyward. You are able to submit a note through Parent Square. So you can click on it and write a response. Yes, it's a much celebrated feature for families, but I also need to remind
Messages?
everyone that
Do you have the app?
I did,
Oh, yeah.
a minute ago.
I want to remind families now, you must supply a note within 3 days of a child's absence. And so that, and you only get 10 parent notes. So the principals have asked me to convey some of those standards. I will tell you, as you've seen, and as you will see, when we talk about building level data from last year, attendance is a significant concern. Now, so COVID, we were sending kids home on quarantine. I mean, but there are, so that is a risk factor, and so, you know, they asked me to convey that in open forum, and I will. Other things I want to remind families about are curriculum and instruction policies on how to review instructional materials, as well as exemption from instruction. Looking at those policies to make sure that those are available. However, there are procedures associated with each of those. I suspect, as in every other year, those, you know, parents will ask how to do that, and so it is 105.1, which is a review. That is done through our curriculum office from a request from a principal, and then they meet and they talk about it. 105.2 requires the review. You have to do 105.1. You have to identify the challenge, and then you have to request exemption. Just for clarity's sake, you know, if there is a strong philosophical or religious disagreement with a portion of the curriculum, you can ask for exemption. It does require the student to know what they're being exempted from and to remove themselves in a very, you know, appropriate way. And we would notify the teacher of that exemption, and we would find a different location and different instructional materials. Our youngest learners, while the policy says that, we of course support children if their parents have applied for and been granted an exception from instruction. No, we do not make a fifth grader be like, I think this is, my mom said I couldn't do this. No, I mean, we facilitate that, and our principals are very mindful of the developmental needs related to that request. I just put these out there as homebound, requires application through the counselor, they submit it to me. It does require a medical note. I want to say this in the public, so we say that we talked about it, it does require it. And
that's not our role, that's the
no,
other
the
role.
parents and
Yeah.
their medical provider need to supply that homebound request. Homebound is only 12 weeks. It's 5 hours of instruction a week. If you need to seek homebound again, you need your medical provider to justify that. What is important and a nuance is that if you request another homebound, the state does require us to apply, because you're really not getting the instructional hours. And so that's something important. At McKinney-Vento, you know, if there are families who are experiencing homelessness or children who are unaccompanied, you know, that means outside the care of their custodial family, they are eligible. And so they need to go see their counselor And with Rachel, the social worker, she will meet with the family, she'll go out and meet with the students, and online supports. So those are some big ones that I just want to make sure that everyone's aware of, and
Okay.
Out of curiosity, do we get a lot of requests for exemption from instruction?
no. Some of them have, and then upon review,
Or denied?
second step, no. They look at what they believe is in that curriculum and what is actually written in that curriculum are very different. And so they no longer request the exemption.
Gotcha.
It's truthfully mostly around that.
Okay. Cool. Anybody else? Moving right along, curriculum review.
Carol, do you have to go? I know you're expecting
Yes.
some family in tonight.
Sorry, I apologize. My son just got in from Hawaii.
Oh, my God, you go, have fun.
It's going to take an hour, so I figured, no. I'm just-
Oh, my God, my son just got in from Hawaii, too. Yeah.
Wow, oddly enough.
You're gonna think this is weird.
I gotta go, this is crazy.
I was gonna take that.
So you got a cat from Lancaster?
No, it's my daughter.
Good to know.
I didn't care, I mean, I love her.
We knew that we were going to spend the bulk of the meeting on Crisis Go and the SEL screener, but I did not want to neglect to share some things with you related to curriculum instruction and assessment. So very quickly, as I've said a lot, we have the implementation of new science standards. What I overlaid on the slide there was next-gen science standards and what Pennsylvania did with it. And we said before they called them the STEEL standards, and you can see where they get that acronym there. Our teachers in 6th through 12th grade last year did a tremendous job of rewriting their curriculum and taking some chances, and they're loving it, both the kids and the teachers. The new biology curriculum, I've had a chance to talk to a couple of the teachers, and they're like, it is incredibly refreshing to stand up here and have the kids doing all the work and smiling while they're doing it, and watching them and the light bulbs go on in a different way. And I applaud their risk-taking, I applaud their diligence in researching and coming up with something that I think is going to be really great for kids.
Cool.
Additionally, I was in the middle school on the 6th grade floor last week, and 2 science teachers had their classes out in the hallway with race cars and measuring sticks, and it was great. It was a lot of fun to just watch that happen and then run so I didn't get hit by a car. But there's a lot of hands-on fun things coming, just as we had sent home in the letter to families to let them know of the changes with NGSS. And then as well in our middle school math curriculum with CPM, we do have some changes happening there. It's very hands-on. I've heard from a couple of families that their kids are coming home saying math is their favorite subject, and they've never said that before, because it's really hands-on understanding and walking around. So I think all of those things are good. I wanted to just draw your attention to the fact that we're implementing 6 through 12, and we're writing K through 5, NGSS, STEELS, aligned curriculum, and I just wanted to make a note there that materials will be expensive. So when I come to you in March, you can remember that. They cost a lot.
Write that down.
Well, and interestingly, we.
Wants money.
That's your workshop
Like a
report.
dollar sign.
Kim said she wants money.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm sure Dr. Roche will be like,
Yeah, he comes to my budget meeting with big scissors. I'm like,
But would you say these materials are cool?
Well, I will say they are. And we looked at a lot of
Okay.
different ones. I mean, we've already
I'll
been
put that in my
looking at
report.
materials. Thank you.
Kim said they're cool.
They're really cool. And the teachers did a nice job of vetting them. I mean, we had a lot of different things to look at, and they did their due diligence, and they were actually able to come to consensus, which I think says a whole lot. And then they said, Kim, what if it costs too much? And I'm like, well, we'll just ask the curriculum. So we're looking at how to make it really most cost effective, but it will be probably more than we've spent on science curriculum in the past. So.
When's the last time
But
we was
I was
spending
just
money on
gonna-
science
so-
curriculum?
Yeah, like,
When's the last time? Was it like 30 years?
Probably
Yeah.
12,
elementary
Wow.
is,
12 to
Yeah.
15 years.
Yeah, that's.
we did not purchase any in the 9 years that I've been
There
here.
you go.
No, I don't think we have.
Well, and I like that the push is that there's a change at the state level that we have to do this, because I think we would have continued to just maybe plow through, because it's hard to inundate elementary teachers because they teach everything. And that's why it's really important to get good standards aligned materials, because it's ready and set for them, and it helps
Which is
them.
cool.
Yeah, it is. And it's really some really neat stuff. So as I'm able to, I'll show you some of that throughout the year when we settle in and have the price tag, and I'm like, look how cool this is. You know, that'll be my approach.
Bring it in.
In terms of assessment, just to let you know, and the way that Andrea shared these beautiful color copies, and that we have the same kind of data for academics, and we've shared them with you before. So we have the same pretty charts and things like that, but we have a lot of them. So we layer in all the different levels of data, and we do that throughout the MTSS process. We do a lot of beginning of year screening, we do middle of year, and we do end of year, and then in between we kind of monitor where students are. The benchmarks give us where those outliers are. Kids we might need to dig a little bit more deeply and see what the problem is, so we get to root cause through some diagnostic testing. So just so you know, we have a literacy and a math portfolio of assessments that we give. It's a problem-solving model. It's not if this, then that. You know, if we see some issues with the child on a math test, we do some, well, maybe it's decoding, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, and then we can choose a diagnostic accordingly. Our beginning of year testing just concluded. It's a lot of work for a lot of people. I got to do some DIBELS testing with second graders, and they're hilarious. So that was fun, and I get to see them, you know, do that, and I really appreciate the opportunity to do that. We have great portfolios, K-5, and we're still growing 6 through 12. It's a little bit different. There are fewer data points. We've talked about this in the past. But this year we do want to work on assessment literacy, and that's why you see literacy on the screen. Making sure teachers understand why we're giving certain assessments, what we use that data for. Are we missing anything about kids that would help us identify root cause or help them? The secondary level, it becomes a different animal to try to build that assessment literacy and why we do this, and then what can we do as a result. We are, as I said earlier, looking at general and special education. There are common curriculum-based assessments. We need to get a really good look at, are they as standards aligned as we want them to be? Are they as rigorous as they need to be? So that helps us then make the changes we need to in instruction. Number one thing to change in instruction in the classroom is the assessment. And you know, how do I help a child prepare for a more rigorous or a more standards aligned assessment? It's by changing what I do in the classroom. And we're not saying everything's wrong, we're just saying that it needs a good look for alignment. And then all the things we've been learning in our professional learning, we can put into practice. So things that we've been learning in TLS for the past 3 years, differentiated instruction, grades 4 through 12, gives them some tangible ways to do some small group work and ensure students are getting what they need. We also brought in this year from the MCIU, their literacy leader in the county, so she can do some work with 6 through 12. Our data indicated we needed some work with TDAs, which are text-dependent analysis questions on the PSSA. We also know we can raise our literature keystone scores, so it's about that analysis of text, really K through 12. So we have someone coming in to help us with that learning 6 through 12. I mentioned middle school math. We're dedicated to CPM, which is college preparatory math. You allowed us to get some training, 4 days of intense training in June for teachers, which I took part in, which was so much fun for me. And we're watching them implement now, and with any program, implementation has bumps. So we have after-school sessions with CPM. We have their coach coming in to watch, observe, and provide feedback for teachers. Every in-service day, we are giving them structured time to work through their assessments and to talk about the presentation of the lesson, because it is very different. So we've had a meeting. There are some bumps. We're working through them. I'm really proud of the way the teachers have taken on the challenge of doing this. For some of them, it's really outside their comfort zone, so I applaud their efforts and their collaboration in that area. We've also been focused at the beginning of this year on K-5 math professional learning. We've used our in-house folks for that because they're outstanding. Our math specialists in the district K-5 are some of the best that I know. And so we've been trying to work with our K-5 teachers because our focus the past few years has been literacy. So we're trying to shift to math and build that learning while not forgetting about everything we learned about literacy. The girls have risen to that challenge, and they just absolutely love it. Upcoming for the rest of this school year, restorative practice, responsive classroom to support some of the things we already talked about today. We do a very structured data days and more to try to help support teachers and students in our Open Kirk learning model, which really shows our focus of that strong foundation, everything we talked about prior to me tonight, and then carrying all of that over into curriculum, assessment, instruction, and classroom management. So that's it. That's my spiel. I think I went 7 minutes.
Good job.
Good job.
But I wanted to let you just see what's happening in curriculum, instruction, and assessment, and just let you know if you had any questions or comments or concerns, feedback. We welcome it all the time.
Okay. Assessments. What do we got?
All done.
All done.
I would
That was
like-
all part of
Program.
that. You just kept rolling.
We're on.
That's what I thought.
Specialist, Hereford.
I do have one more slide. You are aware of this. We shared with you when we got the new allotment for Title I, it was over $500,000, which is a blessing and a curse, because of course we want more money. But it means we have a few more hoops to jump through because we have to spend at least 1% of that on parent engagement. So with all of the extra money, we were able to move Beth Bianco over from 4-5 to Hereford to be the Title I math specialist. And we moved a 4-5 teacher over into that role as math specialist at 4-5, and she's outstanding. So I just,
This is Howard.
yeah,
Yep.
she's doing a great job, and she loves it. Yeah,
Everybody loves it.
yeah,
Mrs.
she's
Bianco's
amazing.
cool too.
Yeah, no, I met her.
So I just wanted to remind you that this was happening and tell you the transition has gone really well, and to tell you to look for information on a combined Hereford and 4-5 parent night in October. I don't know if the date has been totally set, I think it's the 21st, but I want to confirm that just with everybody again. And one of the reasons we're doing this is because we do have to spend a little money. We've that 1% we have to spend on parent and family engagement, and so we want to make that a night where we can invite a lot of our families. We'll have some fun things for students to do while we talk to the parents. We'd like to bring in the library and have some fun activities for the kids to kind of rotate through and parents to get to know their Title I specialists.
Okay. Cool.
Sorry, I jumped through something.
That's okay.
Last
all
one.
good.
I just went to the next,
Yeah.
I just went to 8. All right, so 10.
That's what we just did.
That was-
Yeah.
That was 10. Oh my God.
I was way ahead.
Flip
of
the page,
you.
flip the page.
Flip the page. Oh, wait. But wait, there's more. Our next meeting is October 19th, 2023. Our next meeting highlights include a discussion of building goals and comprehensive plan work for the school year, as well as the high school TSI update.
That's our.
That'll be it.
That's our,
That's it. That's
That's
the
it.
only thing.
no. I think that high school thing's gonna be deep.
Well, so, yeah. But that's why you're only gonna see 2 items.
That's good.
Yeah.
Not squeezing anything on that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
On behalf of the other members of the committee, I would like to thank you for that. Anybody else?
As always, lots of good stuff.
Lots of good stuff. Lots of good stuff.
Excellent.
Yep.
Lots of good stuff. Okay, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion?
Second.
Ooh, although, any discussion? Thank you. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Meeting adjourned.
Right.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, it was good. I love all those data points. That's cool.
So many people.
One in attendance tonight. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out. We even try to make these meetings fun. Come on, people.
I think this isn't very fun, maybe.
I think this is facilities is fun too, because it's buildings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But this one's really cool.
He's just saying that